was Neil Armstrong. Chapter 1. A boy who loved flying. Just after midnight on April 5th, 1930, Neil Armstrong was born in the Ohio farmhouse that belonged to his grandparents. Neil was the oldest of Stephen and Viola Armstrong's 3 children. He had a younger sister named June and a younger brother named Dean. Neil was also his mother's pet. She once wrote that he was a pleasure for us to raise in every way. Maybe that was because Neil was a lot like his mother, calm, serious, and determined. Neil never had a trouble making friends. Still, he was shy and not as fun-loving as Dean. Neil's mother stayed at home caring for the children. She also taught Sunday school. Neil's father, who worked for the Ohio state government, because of his job, the family had to move many times. In fact, they moved 16 times before Neil was 13. Finally, the Armstrongs settled in the little Ohio town of Wapakoneta. I probably mispronounced that. In the 1930s, planes were still thought of as unusual and exciting. Many people had never flown in one. Only 3 years before Neil was born, in 1927, Charles Lindbergh flew nonstop across the Atlantic. He was the first person to make a transatlantic flight, and it took 33.5 hours to get to Europe. People from the United States still traveled by ships, which took 4 days on a luxury liner. For long trips across the country, people took trains. In 1930, it took about a week to get from New York to California by railroad. From the time he was a little boy, Neil was fascinated by airplanes and flying. When he was just a toddler, he saw an air show in Cleveland, Ohio, with his dad. Neil took his first plane ride when he was only 6. The plane was called the Tin Goose. It wasn't really made of tin. Its strong body was made of aluminum. The Tin Goose could carry up to 12 passengers who sat on scratchy wicker seats. Its engine rattled and roared as the goose reached a little over 100 miles an hour. Later on, Neil's father confessed that he had been scared to death. As for Neil, he had enjoyed every minute in the Tin Goose. The first airplane. The Wright brothers, Orville and Wilbur, grew up in Dayton, Ohio, near where Neil Armstrong was born. Like Neil, they were interested in anything that flew from the time they were kids. They made paper toys that they called bats, which could glide on air currents. But in 1903, when Wilbur was 36 and Orville was 32, they did something amazing. Something that people had dreamed of doing for thousands of years. They built the first real airplane, one with an engine that actually flew instead of gliding on the wind. Their one-seater plane was made of wood and cloth. It was 8 feet high and had wings that went 40 feet across. Orville made the first successful flight on December 17, 1903, in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. The weather was much better than it was in Ohio. How long was the first flight? Only 12 seconds. And how far did the plane travel? Only 120 feet. And it was only 20 feet off the ground. But it was the beginning of a whole new age. Neil loved building paper airplanes out of balsa wood, wire, and tissue paper. They were powered by wound-up rubber bands. In the basement, he would set up a wind tunnel from a fan so he could see how well his models flew. According to his brother Dean, Sometimes Neil would fly one of his model planes out the window. He thought it was exciting to watch it crash into the driveway. Neil belonged to the Boy Scout troops for many years. In fact, Neil became an Eagle Scout, the highest level in scouting. It was the 1940s by the time the United States was fighting Germany in World War II. Neil and the other scouts made models of different enemy planes. No warplanes ever came anywhere near Ohio. Still, if one had, Neil could have identified it right away. Neil read airplane magazines. He drew detailed sketches of his favorite planes. Learning about planes, however, wasn't the same as flying planes. And that's what Neil wanted to do most of all.